Hello everyone, welcome back to my latest video. Today I would like to speak about another important law governing our daily lives here in India, namely the Motor Vehicles Act 1988. Now we all drive motor vehicles in India, whether it be driving a car or scooter or riding in a bus for going wherever we want to go. But as we know, driving vehicles, although it is a necessity for our daily lives, it's also inherently dangerous. With the increase in number of vehicles being driven and with the dangers of reckless driving and so on, there is always the risk of us losing our lives or at least getting seriously injured in traffic accidents. So to prevent or at least to correct any disasters that occur in the aftermath of such accidents, this act was enacted. It was enacted first in 1988, but it has since undergone several enactments in 2019 as well. Those 2019 enactments are what are applicable in the current act now. So I would like to speak more about this act. So moving on ahead here now. So as I explained earlier, the Motor Vehicles Act is essentially enacted for the purpose of ensuring the safety of drivers of vehicles, their passengers and also of pedestrians on the roads in India. So one object is to regulate traffic behavior. It is to ensure that there is no unnecessarily reckless driving or no inexperienced drivers are driving on the roads, or if they are driving under proper supervision. Then in India, movement across states is free, unlike for instance in countries like China where movement across different regions often require permits. Here in India it is relatively free, but nevertheless regulating movement across state borders is still essential, so the Motor Vehicles Act governs that as well. Then the next objective of the act is to establish liability. Essentially, in case of any accidents, the act aims to ensure that victims of traffic accidents are properly compensated, namely through insurance of the defaulting parties, that is the ones who caused the accident. Then the another important objective of the act is to standardize driver competence. As in, it is this act aims to ensure that by introducing the licensing system for authorizing the operation of motor vehicles, no inexperienced or no foolhardy drivers try to drive motor vehicles, thus doing its best to ensure that our already somewhat unsafe streets are rendered a bit safer. Then the motor vehicles have also been cited as a major cause of air pollution. So this act has also aimed to establish the environmental protection. It aims to ensure the protection of our environment by establishing standards of emission for motor vehicles, ensuring that only certain class of vehicles which consume fuel efficiently without emitting too much waste gas, only those vehicles are allowed to be operated on our roads. So essentially these four objectives are what the Motor Vehicles Act ensures, especially in light of the 2019 amendments. This act is an attempt to ensure the proper regulation of traffic on the road and to ensure our overall safety while traveling on the roads. Of course, it's not all that successful when it comes to, for instance, standardizing driver competence. There are lots of cases of especially bribery involved when you avail of licenses during driving tests and so on. And compared to say foreign countries like Western countries where the criteria for availing driving license is much more stricter than in India, so which means the act is somewhat of an attempt but not much. However, amendments are being made which hopefully will continue to make the law more stricter and ensure our safety on the roads better. So what does this act cover? So this act comprises of various sections, but I will not elaborate on those sections in detail much. So just to summarize it, this act comprises of chapters, and those chapters are divided into four sections. So section number 1 is licensing of drivers. Chapters 1, 2 and 3 of this act, they formally define the criteria for the eligibility of people to take driving licenses. Then it lays down the manner in which driving tests are to be conducted for those who wish to be authorized to drive motor vehicles. Then it also lays down under what criteria license holders could be potentially disqualified. Let's say if they have been involved in too many accidents, or if drink driving has occurred, or so on. Then another section is registration of vehicles. So under the chapter 4 of this act lays down the provisions saying that if you buy a vehicle and if you are residing in a particular area, you need to register that vehicle with the RTO authorities of your area, or not RTO authorities, with the state government authorities, whatever authorities are they have jurisdiction over vehicle registration. I would say it's RTO authorities only, but anyway, RTO authorities are, or any other authorities as specified in the act, are primarily assigned with registration of vehicles. So under this chapter, every vehicle is required to be registered if you want to operate it. They need to have a proper license plate on the front and back side of the vehicle, and you need to have all registration documents. In case of traffic accidents, the police, the traffic inspectors, and any other personnel involved who are on site at the accident, they usually check these registration documents to ensure that you are not driving an unregistered vehicle. Driving an unregistered vehicle carries a heavy penalty. So under chapter 4 ensures that all vehicle owners are required to register their vehicles after purchasing them. And of course, under given the advancements in technology, the registration documents are all maintained on the online platform. So these vehicles are also assigned a digital identity, a unique digital identity, sort of like our Aadhaar number. So on various apps which are maintained in respect of vehicles and all, I'll elaborate on those apps further. But on those apps, the registration documents regarding whatever vehicle you have purchased are maintained in an electronic form. So no need to carry around too many documents. So that's the one section. The other section is control of transport. Now when it comes to transport vehicles like trucks or lorries, the licensing requirements or the regulatory requirements for transport vehicles is even more strict than motor cars or other light vehicles, largely because those of you know that transport trucks or lorries and all, they are usually very heavily involved in accidents, since they are required to operate overnight as well. So there is always the danger of drivers falling asleep and trucks crashing or breaking down. Not to mention, trucks and lorries are extremely massive, so motor cars or small vehicles getting struck by them can result in fatalities for the people in those light vehicles. So which is why chapter 4 provides for stringent regulations regarding the operation of motor vehicles, as in transport vehicles like trucks and lorries. Then this chapter lays down that registration of transport vehicles lies strictly with the state authorities, the authorities involved in regulating that transport vehicles. They are the ones who take care of this aspect. They are the ones who issue transport permits regarding the usage of transport vehicles. So chapter 5 is specifically for trucks and lorries. Then one of the most important sections of this act is insurance and claims. Chapter 11 and 12, they have laid down that if any accident occurs, the victims of the accident, they are liable to be compensated by the defaulting party through his or her insurance company, essentially third party insurance claims. And the jurisdiction regarding such matters lies with an established body called the Motor Accident Claims Tribunal. This the state governments, they are authorized under the act to establish motor accident claims tribunals in one or more areas specific throughout the state, specifically to govern any claims resulting from motor vehicle accidents. So if both the parties have reached a settlement, they are required to lay down that settlement before the tribunal, and if the tribunal accepts it, then they are required to conclude such hearings within a specified period, usually say 6 to 12 months maximum. There is a maximum 12 months the motor accident claim tribunal is required to settle any motor accident disputes, no more than that. And civil courts or any other courts of jurisdiction in the state, they are not allowed to intervene where a motor accident claim tribunal is present. The tribunal is like a quasi judicial body. They have all invested in them all the powers of a civil court when it comes to motor accidents. Civil courts or other courts are not allowed to interfere when it comes to motor accident claims, except in certain cases. Like say if there is if it goes for appeal, then the High Court can intervene and the Supreme Court, just like in normal cases. So moving on ahead. Now, as I said earlier, the 1988 Act was enacted when it came to, and at a time when technology was not widely prevalent, so it didn't lay down provisions for maintenance of digital documents and so on. But of course, with the advancement of technology and with websites now being maintained for many purposes, so it's no coincidence that when it comes to motor vehicle operations also, there are dedicated websites. Now there are two websites, namely Sarathi and Vahan. Now Sarathi governs the licenses of the operators of motor vehicles. In Sarathi website, you could apply for a learner's license, you could book your driving test, then after driving test you can also download your permanent driving license through this website or app really. Then there is another website called Vahan, which is specifically dedicated to motor vehicles. Here the registration documents of whatever motor vehicles you maintain can be maintained in digital form, and you can show this in any eventuality of an accident, which means you don't have to take the trouble of carrying around too many paper documents and waste time trying to search one. You could just, in the event of anything happening like an accident or something, you could just show these documents on your Vahan app in your mobile. So these two apps specifically govern licenses and registration of vehicles and so on. Then the M-Parivahan app, this is a dedicated app. Again, just like the other two apps, the M-Parivahan app is like an umbrella sort of app under which Sarathi and Vahan, they come under M-Parivahan. So M-Parivahan, it maintains digital copies of driving license and registration document copies, and this is via DigiLocker. So in case any accident has occurred and you don't have to panic about not having a physical license or physical registration documents, you could just show it to the police officers on site through your M-Parivahan app. Since M-Parivahan app is a dedicated website for maintaining these documents, and as essentially M-Parivahan incorporates both licenses and registration documents, unlike Sarathi and Vahan, which are dedicated websites for either of these two purposes but not both. Then another way of registration is, another thing is contactless. So now if you want to renew your driving license, according to this act, you can avail driving license at any time, but after 40 you are required to renew it. So if you want to renew your driving license, or you want to modify your registration documents for any reason, you can you don't have to go visit the RTO or visit any other place physically. You could just do it through the M-Parivahan app or Sarathi or Vahan apps through Aadhaar based verification digitally. So again, the digitization of everything that's happening in all aspects of our lives, this has happened when it comes to motor vehicles as well. When it comes to obtaining licenses or keeping the motor vehicle related registration documents, or even or renewing licenses or modifying those documents and so on. So moving on ahead. Now, in 1988 Act, there were fines and penalties laid down. Like say, for instance, if you committed any serious offense leading to an accident, you were fined rupees 500. But this was way back in 1988 when rupees 500 was a lot more worth than it is now. So nowadays, if you pay rupees 500, it is not really a strict penalty. It won't really serve as a highly penalizing ground if you want to ensure that the the person involved in the accident who caused the accident doesn't do it again. So 2019 amendments to the act ensured that the monetary worth of these fines was further upgraded in line with the monetary worth of today's times. So uh, let me talk about some of these penalties. So when it comes to drinking and driving, if you drunk any sort of alcohol and are driving at the time, and because of which any accidents occurred, so if the police conduct blood tests and where they find concentrations of alcohol in the blood, they find out that you are drunk, then you are required to pay a heavy penalty of rupees 10,000 for that accident, which is pretty punishing. 10,000 is a huge fine for most people. Then if you are driving without a license, whether it be physical license, or if you don't, you can maintain a digital license as I specified earlier, but if you don't have even that as well, if you don't have a license at all, then the penalty rate again is very heavy. It's something about rupees 5,000. Then during driving, if you are driving way above the speed limit specified on the road, and if you are caught in the air, or if any accidents happened due to overspeeding, or if any police officer catches you in the act, then you are required to pay a heavy fine of rupees 2,000 for that incident. Then if you are not wearing a seat belt while driving a vehicle, or if as a front seat passenger you are not putting on the seat belt, again a heavy penalty of 1,000 rupees as per the amendments. Then if for instance you are under 18 or under 16 in respect of certain motor vehicles, and you are caught driving a vehicle recklessly, and you are happen to be underage, like I said, below age of 18 or 16 in certain cases, then the guardian who entrusted such minor with the vehicle, and minor himself, uh, in a way, they would be liable to a heavy penalty of 25,000 rupees. That literally is the monthly salary of a lot of people. So again, pretty punishing. So make sure, so don't recklessly entrust your motor vehicles to your kids who are under the age of 18 or 16 in certain cases. Make sure they are of proper age, or make sure they get proper training before driving a vehicle. Best yet, don't give them vehicles until they attain the proper age of driving. So otherwise you'd get heavily penalized with 25,000, and of course your the offending minor would also be charged as a juvenile and sent to a facility. So 2019 amendments have now ensured that the penalties are pretty heavy in line with the monetary worth of today, and also pretty penalizing. You could say 10,000 for drink and driving, and 25,000 for underage driving is pretty heavy for a lot of people anyway. So moving on ahead. Now 2019 amendments to this act have also provided for certain provisions which were not present in the earlier in the old act. So one is called a Good Samaritan law. Samaritan as in citizens who selflessly help injured people or victims in the event of any accident or any mishap without any expectation of monetary reward or gain. Now in the earlier act, there was no protection for citizens who was selflessly helped out in the event of an accident. Sometimes they could be taken in for questioning by the police and unnecessarily harassed by especially by the guilty party or so on. So the 2019 act has ensured that uh, those people who go on to help victims of accidents without any expectation of reward, they are provided with legal immunity from either police or hospital harassment. Essentially, they are exempted from police questioning or hospital questioning in the event of an accident. That way, this encourages people to help out in the event of an accident and to ensure they are not unnecessarily punished for doing good deeds. So this law protects them from police or hospital harassment. Then another provision it lays down is something called the golden hour. So according to the amendments, this provision has been inserted where it identifies that after the accident has occurred, the first 1 or 2 hours, the first hour to be safe, is usually identified as critical since it would make the difference between life and death for the victims of the accident. Since if the accident is especially very serious, if they are not provided immediate first aid within that 1 hour, they could end up losing their lives on the site itself. So that way, this provision has also laid down that within that first hour after the accident, they are to be rendered treatment free of cost. Nothing is to be charged from the victims for that first hour of treatment. That way, this also ensures that timely aid is sought out for victims of accidents and that they don't end up unnecessarily suffering from serious injuries or don't risk death simply because they do not have much money to pay during the first 1 or 2 hours of their treatment. Then another provision it's laid down is interstate coordination. Now under the old act, although there is freedom of movement guaranteed by the Constitution of India, when it comes to state cross-state movements across borders, there was heavy bureaucracy involved, like document processing at toll plazas or checkpoints across the borders, which means precious time would be lost, which could have been saved in rendering proper treatment to victims at the hospital and preventing needless deaths. So under this provision, it has laid down provisions for interstate coordination, essentially ensuring that ambulances move quickly across state lines if they are required to do so, and that they are not unnecessarily halted because of bureaucracy at checkpoints and such. That way ensuring that victims are properly treated at hospitals on time, thereby hopefully saving more lives than what used to be the case. Then now some more amendments have happened now. One of the amendments which has happened is mandatory recalls. Now sometimes it may happen, a lot of times it happens that it may not necessarily be the driver's fault that an accident occurred. The driver drove perfectly well. He followed all the rules, he followed all the laws of the road, but the problem lay with the vehicle. Like the vehicle was defective, like say the gears of the vehicle did not function properly, or brakes were faulty, which means you could not stop in time or something. So essentially faulty vehicles really. But the old act did not lay down any provision for recall of such vehicles if they were identified as defective. It was essentially left to the vehicle owner himself to fix his vehicle, and essentially there was no essentially if the owner, if he did not have the money to fix his vehicle, he would choose to let his vehicle remain unfixed, so which means the danger of road accidents due to faulty vehicles remain. But the 2019 amendment has now fixed that the under this amendment the central government, if it is identified that certain class of vehicles have been identified as defective for any reason, whether it be due to faulty brake system or gear system, then the central government is authorized to order a mandatory recall of all such vehicles without seeking consent of the owners involved, since the main priority is to ensure safety on the roads, or if those vehicles have been identified as environmentally polluting in nature, then also they can be recalled. So essentially under this new provision, the central government is now authorized and compelled to recall all defective vehicles, thus ensuring safety of the roads. Then another provision it laid down is manufacturer fines. Earlier under the old act, even though fines were levied on drivers and stuff, there was no fine on the manufacturer of the vehicles for manufacturing the vehicles in the which caused the collision in the first place, if they manufactured the vehicles carelessly, leaving serious defects. There was no provision for penalizing them. Now in the new act, that has also been fixed. It is understood now that sometimes faulty manufacturing can also cause accidents even if the drivers follow the rules of the road. So under the new amendments, the manufacturers are also now held liable for any accidents. Some of the penalties sometimes reaches up to rupees 100 crore even. Essentially a very heavy penalty on the manufacturers for faulty vehicles causing accidents, or if they do not adhere, if they do not follow established safety rules or protocols when it comes to manufacturing vehicles and so on. So essentially recalling faulty vehicles mandatorily or penalizing manufacturers for faulty vehicles, these are the changes brought about in the 2019 amendments. Then another, the 2019 amendments has also brought about a national policy. Like earlier under the old act, every state was had the choice to formulate and follow its own policy, which did was good for autonomy of the states, but which caused confusion when it came to penalizing drivers and other matters, or implementing road safety rules across states and so on, since each state had its own rules which were different. Now 2019 act has laid down clearly that when it comes to operations of transport systems like transport of goods and transport of passengers in buses and so on, so this act has ensured that there is but one unified national policy applicable to all states uniformly. So regulations are consistent. There is no dispute between states when it comes to cross-border travel and so on. So this is another important amendment. Another last important amendment is fitness norms. So when it comes to now, earlier there essentially earlier it was purely human driven, the driving test or the determination of criteria of fitness for driving. It was all left to the discretion of humans originally, which means obviously there is the introduction of bias when it comes to determining fitness to drive and so on, since paying suitable bribes mean the driver would obviously deem you fit to drive regardless of whether you are fit or not. But under the new provisions, there has been introduction of AI systems which ensures that the determination of the fitness criteria for driving is now determined based on predetermined criteria which is implanted in automated systems. Well, there is some human intervention of course, but much of it is now automated, which means there is no provision for where you could get away with paying a heavy bribe and thus obtaining a license on the cheap. So these are the provisions. These are essentially the criteria, the amendments which ensure that road safety is maintained properly. Essentially, which ensures that the safety of people on the road is properly ensured, or at least better ensured than it was earlier. Of course, we have still miles to go, but hopefully improvements will slowly occur, and safety of people on the road is ensured better and better. Then there are some case laws which were introduced. One of the most important case laws was Mukund Devangan versus Oriental Insurance. Under this case was taken before the Supreme Court. So there had been a long-standing dispute brought before the court, which where it was the question was, if you held a light motor vehicle license, like say a motor car or other small vehicle, or let's say you motor car or van, which are all classified as light motor vehicles. So if you held a license for operating those vehicles, so could you operate transport vehicles for transporting a larger number of passengers or transporting goods if they came within the same class? So the Supreme Court ruled that yes, if you held an LMV license, then legally you are allowed to drive a transport vehicle, provided that transport vehicle was under 7,500 kg unladen weight. Unladen as in this transport vehicle did not have any load attached to it. Let's say this transport vehicle traveled without any trailer attached to it, for instance. So if below 7,500 kg unattached weight, if you are using a transport vehicle, if you held an LMV license, you could operate transport vehicle of the same class as specified here, as the Supreme Court specified. So the importance of this ruling was it protected thousands of light motor vehicle license holders who operated transport vehicles from being potentially disqualified to operate those vehicles and having to apply for licenses all over again. So essentially this case law prevented a lot of hassle for thousands of drivers operating small transport vehicles. So that was the importance of this judgment. Next judgment is Pranay Sethi 2017. So what was the importance of this case? Now, before this case, earlier when it came to calculating compensation for victims of motor accidents, the methods were not very consistent. Sometimes if the defendants had sufficient influence, they could influence the tribunal into determining far less compensation for the victims than they deserved, or if the facts of the case were not so clear, then the victims would not get as much compensation as they deserved. So and the other so that there was a lack of uniformity when it came to calculating compensation. Then inconsistent rulings. The several different tribunals, or if there are no tribunals, then courts of those areas, they used varied multipliers. Now when it comes to Motor Vehicles Act, there are multipliers used to calculate compensation, like if the monetary for instance, if in a case it is determined that a certain amount would be served as the base amount of compensation, then it would be multiplied by 10 or 12 or other number, depending on depending on the severity of the accident and the severity of the injuries that the victims have suffered. So essentially a lot of multipliers and percentages also were used, and it differed case to case and court to court basis. But again the problem was legal outcomes often were unfair. Defendants could use precedents to their unfair advantage to ensure that victims received less compensation than deserved, which means the defendants got away somewhat lightly with far lesser fines. So this case, Pranay Sethi aimed to fix those problems. It set a standardized formula. Now it determined that, for instance, if the victim of the accident was self-employed, now obviously even when you are going to a job, suffering an accident could harm your career prospects severely. So, but even then, if their employers were kind, you could take extended leave and recover from the accidents or work from home as is done nowadays. But what happens if you are running your own business or something? Essentially, if you are self-employed, your business would be adversely affected because you couldn't manage your own business, and that would be adversely affected because your clients or your customers would expect to deal with you. You are the one running the business, so they would want to deal with you. If you are not there to deal with them, you end up losing business to other competing businesses. So self-employed victims would be affected far more by accidents than job doers. So when it comes to self-employed victims, this case set a mandatory addition of 25% or a maximum being 40% of future potential income. If whatever the court to determine the income, thus the businessman or person would have earned if he or she had been in a fit state, uh, the 25 to 40% of that income is mandatorily required to be paid as compensation to such victims. Then another importance of this judgment was it established fairer compensation. It essentially established mathematical precision. Essentially, it ensured that the variety of uh, the ambiguity and variety of compensation criteria that existed state to state or court to court or case to case basis, that was eradicated. Instead, it set a uniform, precise mathematical basis for calculation of compensation. So Pranay Sethi set the foundation for uniform fair compensation for, especially for self-employed victims of accidents. So to conclude this video, the Motor Vehicles Act 1988 and more importantly the amendments to this act in 2019, they have ensured that the operation of motor vehicles on the road is properly regulated, that those who suffer from accidents, for those who are injured, they receive fair compensation, or this act lays down that those who are operating motor vehicles, they undergo the proper procedure for obtain, and they have to obtain licenses to operate motor vehicles, and if they are caught doing offenses, their licenses also could get temporarily suspended or permanently revoked. And more importantly, under the amendments, because they have established the good Samaritan rights, so those who help out in accidents are protected from unnecessarily police or hospital harassment. Or when it comes to the digital arena, and the Parivahan portal or the other portals I talked about, the Vahan and Sarathi portals, and not to mention the far more heavy penalties that I have talked about earlier. All of this have ensured, they aim to ensure that the operation of motor vehicles is done with a little more care and concern than was done previously. That those who want to operate cars or other vehicles on the road, they are a lot more careful about doing so, that they do so with regard to safety of others on the road, and also with regard to safety for themselves as well. So ultimately, the importance of this law is that it serves to protect everybody on the road, whether it be drivers and passengers in vehicles, or even for that matter pedestrians walking on the road, since they are the ones most vulnerable to accidents, since pedestrians are the least protected uh, people on the road. Motor vehicle people at least have some protection, even if it is not much. Motor bicycle or scooter operators also do not have much protection, but pedestrians are the least. So this act specifically is for those of us who are pedestrians. So to conclude, so again, just concluding this video, it is advisable for all of you to follow this law and make good use of everything that I have talked about in this video, whether it be the digital registration of vehicles or digital obtaining of licenses, and be wary of the heavy penalties and ensure you drive properly on the road and keep yourself and everybody else safe on the road. So I hope this video has helped you all to understand the importance of the law relating to the motor vehicles in India, and I hope this law helps you to have a better awareness on the importance of safe operation of vehicles on the roads, that you safely drive on the road or safely walk on the road, that is. So thank you all for watching this video. Please like, comment and recommend this video to anyone else you know. Please also subscribe to my channel at Siddharth Bhatt 4898 and recommend that channel to anyone else you know. Once again, thank you all for taking out your precious time to watch this video. Thank you all for your time for watching this video. Thank you all for watching the video. Thank you all. Thank you. Thank you.